So it's a great pleasure to welcome Alan Bagnall. I've known Alan for quite a good few years. He's a consultant cardiologist in Newcastle Hospitals Trust, but the reason he's here is that he's also a co-clinical academic lead for the secure data environment, which is the topic of today's conversation. But he's also deputy clinical director for the local clinical research network. So he's very much into the sort of bigger picture regional stuff and is therefore well versed to speak on this. And delighted also to welcome Mark Walsh, who again I've known for a wee while. Mark, I think, is based at the Health Innovation Network Northeast North Cumbria, but he's here in his capacity as portfolio manager for the secure data environment, and he is here to pitch in on the Q&A if required. So I think I've managed to talk us through that long enough with the intro, and we have Alan now. So Alan, it's over to you, and fingers crossed that we can keep you this time.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mark Walsh. As said, I'm the kind of program lead for the SDE development for the Northeast and North Cumbria. And I'll just stand in while Alan comes back. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we're just going to cover what the secure data environment is, a bit about the Data Access Committee, and also the Research and Development Data Repository, which we're developing as part of this. Just to give some kind of context, some background, so the SDEs really, the concept's been around for a little while now. It was very high profile through the Goldacre report, which was published in April 2022 by Professor Ben Goldacre, which looked at the kind of current complexity and challenges which researchers faced in accessing and using healthcare data in research, and looked at how we can kind of rebalance some of the complexities to make sure we had the right governance and safeguards in place, but we didn't make it so too complicated and so time consuming for kind of research purposes. That led into what was the Data Saves Lives strategy, which was published by the Department of Health and Social Care, where it actually mandated the secure data environments across England, and then that led into a policy update just at the end of 2023 called Data Access by Default, where it started to identify that, where in policy it stated that basically use of research for data, use of data for research purposes would be through a secure data environment network within England. That isn't for all research projects. There will be exceptions, but there is this genuine funneling of use of research data for projects through the SDE network, and also the concept of data access through the SDEs rather than distributing out, which obviously has been a more kind of traditional method. Alan, you've reappeared. Do you want to pick up from there?
Sure. Thank you. Sorry about that. I stopped sharing and it kicked me off again. So you've just talked about the policy shift there, I think is where I came in.
Yeah.
So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I think Mark may have talked about the original Goldacre review, which recommended the introduction of the SDEs. But although that original review only envisaged a maximum of 3 secure data environments, that the final chosen model by the government was to actually create 11 subnational secure data environments, along with one national one that looks after the national clinical data sets. So the North East and North Cumbria successfully bid for £8 million to establish a secure data environment in the North East and North Cumbria. And currently we have that funding in place until March of 2025. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what an SDE is. So it's an online cloud-based data access platform. And it's a new way of making health and care data for research and analysis available to you. So data is brought into the secure platform for only approved specific projects by approved specific researchers. These approved and vetted researchers are then allowed to access to that data, but only inside this virtual SDE environment. So it's this model of bringing the researchers to the data rather than making copies and sharing that data outside of the NHS. We can go to the next slide, please. So what is the problem that the SDEs are seeking to solve? Click next, please. Well, currently data research is challenging from the perspective of both researchers, the public, and people who control data like secondary care organisations and GPs. So let's look at each of these groups in turn. For researchers, the issues are firstly knowing which data are available and where to find it. And gaining access currently requires navigation of multiple and often inconsistent information governance processes. You then need to curate that data, manage it, perform the linkage, and all of that before we can even begin to analyze the data. And the more data sets that you want to combine, the more data controllers you need to work with. And if I give you an idea of the scale of that issue, in the North East and North Cumbria, there are over 400 individual data controllers alone. Next, please. For the public and for GPs, there are legitimate concerns regarding how their health and care data might be used and how well protected that data is. They need to have the ability to be able to opt out easily and to make informed decisions about how their data is used and stored. Next, please. And finally, for all of these 400 data controllers, they may be inundated with requests. And if you're a small GP practice, you might lack the supporting infrastructure or the time to be able to properly assess both researchers and the projects. And if you get that wrong, you're liable for any data breaches or inappropriate use of the data that can occur. And that can often be very expensive. And that can commonly lead to a reluctance amongst data controllers to share their data. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Next, please. So what are the benefits of the secure data environments? Well, principally for researchers, it means that you've got the ability to find the data that you need. Locating those data sets, knowing what they are, becomes easier. Linking that data inside becomes easier because we are able to do that for you. And there's only one single approval process to go through. So the whole rigmarole of large data research, which can often take years to be able to get all of those approvals in place, is very much simplified. For the data contributors, they can be ensured that their data is safe and protected through robust legal processes. They essentially sign an agreement to share the data with a single data controller who then takes responsibility. And for us, that single data controller is going to be the North East and North Cumbria Integrated Care Board. That means the ongoing volume and management of requests for data become less resource intensive for them. And we're going to be talking a little bit later on about the data repository. They may have an ongoing revenue income from uses of data sets which have been put in there into the repository and are persistent. So next slide, please. Let's now talk about the Data Access Committee, which is really the cornerstone of how you have your project assessed and approved for use within the SDE. So this is the key approval process through which all potential researchers and projects have to go. And we've been co-creating the Data Access Committee using input from our patient public involvement groups, from GP groups, from secondary care groups, information governance experts, etc. And looking at processes that are going to be fit for purpose, slick, and importantly, that you only have to do once to be able to provide the Data Access Committee with all the information that it requires to be able to make a decision. Now, as I said, that DAC is a diverse group of people who are on it, but really importantly has a very strong patient and public voice built into its processes. And that means that any project that doesn't meet public approval can be vetoed by the public engagement group. And we think that's really important because of the problems that we've had in mechanisms to share large data like care.data in the past, which basically didn't fly because of loss of trust of the public. Next slide, please. Final thing I'd like to talk about today is the R&D data repository. So unlike the situation in the SDE where you bring in specific data sets you perform your analysis inside the SDE, and then the data sets are destroyed. The repository is a curated and persistent database. So there will be, if you like, a menu of specific data sets that are available with metadata that describes what they contain, what information is in there, so you can decide if that's appropriate for the type of research project that you'd like to do. Now, we use a Section 251 legal framework for flowing data into these data sets, and they're often will be coming in from secondary care and primary care. And that the use of that 251 legal framework means that we're then able to work with other SDEs who also who are also using that same legal framework. And you can then start to do cross SDE projects, so you can get national reach into the types of big data that you'd like to look at. It also means that there are less work for the data controllers, because with these curated and persistent data sets, the data is in there. They don't have to go through the vetting process again. It's again down to the DAC to be able to say on a case-by-case basis, is this the right person and this is the right project to be able to go ahead. Next slide, please. And so this is, next we're going to just talk about where we had hoped to be by March 25, and I'm going to give you some reasons in a moment why that might not necessarily be the case, but if we could have first build, please. So we hope to have a state whereby for researchers, we are having a single standard form, a bit like the IRAS form, that will be the kind of one source of all information that you put in once, that will then feed into the DAC and the public engagement groups and to the data controllers in order to be able to make the decisions. As I said, there's this ongoing involvement of public, both in the design and the decision-making process around project approvals. And we are really keen to ensure that there's absolute transparency about which projects and data we're doing, and giving people easy mechanism to be able to opt out. And for the data controllers, we hope that means they can have a reduced number of data transactions and requests, but still be able to maintain their income that they have that is currently related to data sharing for research. Next, please. And we hope to achieve all that through the DAC, which we've just spoken about. Next, please. The producing a catalogue of information, a kind of menu, if you like, for all the stuff that's in there. Importantly, all that data is anonymized, but it can be linked still. And it's all will be done with the National Standards for Security and confidentially through our partnership with a technical platform, which is being hosted by NEX, the Northeast Commissioning Service. Next build, please. And finally, we hope to have our R&D data repository where we'll have our regionally identified data sets for people to use, with a clear data catalog with lots of metadata there to help you understand exactly what you can get from those data sets, and for that to have a searchable database. Now, as I say, that's where we hope to be by March 2025, but because of some delays in the timing of the funding coming in from the Department of Health, timelines have slipped. There is some ongoing uncertainty because the SDEs have been identified as one of the kind of bargaining tools, if you like, in the BMA's current negotiations with the government about the new GP contract. So we're meeting with the GP group this evening, in fact, to discuss about implications for that. So next slide, please. And so that's where I want to stop. Hopefully we've given you kind of a brief overview of what it is, what the potentials are there for the SDE. Hopefully it's whetted your appetites for the types of research that can be done to be able to facilitate doing this type of big data research that's been so challenging to do in the past. We've got a website here and some QR codes that you can use to access that. But we've got some time for questions now, hopefully. And you know, if you need to get in touch, Mark and I are available anytime for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Mark, for stepping in at the start. After a slightly hesitant beginning through no fault of either of yours, that's been absolute tour de force. And actually, I've not known an audience actually exceed the number that we were expecting. So that's testament to the interest in this area. So do we have any questions from colleagues? I think there must be questions here. If you want to pop your hand up or pop a question into the into the chat. Either's good. Oh, there we go. Starting to come in there now. So we've got a question there. I don't know if you can read. I'll read it out in case you can't see it, Alan and Mark. Thanks, really useful presentation. It's from Michelle Watt. Can I just ask how the data will be ingested, good word, into the SDE?
Yeah, I'll pick that one up. Thanks. So there's really two mechanisms, and this gets back to the kind of complexity. So the basically data will be kind of taken with agreement, obviously, from the data providers. So whether that's a hospital trust, whether that's through the GP system. So a subset of the data will be kind of taken and made available for the SDE projects. As Alan said earlier, currently we'd need to do that on a project per project basis, and then it can only be used for that purpose. But with the providers' agreement and going through the governance of the Data Access Committee, when we've got approval for for our Section 251, we can hold that data within the data repository so it can be reused for other purposes. Again, it would have to go through the relevant governance to do that. But it means that we don't have to go back to the data providers repeatedly, put workload on them, as well as ourselves to bring that data back in. So there's kind of the source of the data will be through things like EPR systems, etc. But over time, more and more data will be held in that kind of central research repository. And just to say, I think Alan may have said this, but we're just expecting the outcome of our Section 251 literally any time. We went to CAG and REC the week before last, and we're told it would take 7 to 10 days. So we're expecting it any time. So.
Thanks. I'm just mindful of time, Mark. We've got about another 4 questions, so we're going to need to keep the answers fairly tight. So, oh gosh, yes. Okay, this is great. I mean, our NHS digital.
David, do you want me just to whiz through, and I'll try and give very quick answers?
Can you see the chat? Can you see the questions?
Yes,
if you can, Mark, why don't you just read them down, because then that'll save me.
So in terms of other data platforms such as eChild, I'm not familiar with eChild. I've got to say that the overall vision is to converge these through the SDEs, but like I say, there may be the government said there will be some exceptions to be defined. So we'll kind of look at government policy and also kind of anything locally where we think there should be exceptions. But the overall policy is to route as many of these as they can through the SDE for the reasons hopefully we've made apparent. Can companies gain access to the SDE? Yes. But again, that would have to go through our governance, including through the public members group. So it would have to be in the public interest, and there will be certain exemptions to that. So for instance, insurance companies and things. And just getting back to Alan's point, people can't take data out of the SDE. It will be on a read-only basis to a subset of data in the SDE. If organised to shed out what the implications for the quality of the data, the data quality is always going to be a big challenge. We've got mechanisms within the SDE to do data processing, including data quality, but and we'd also accommodate obviously any data quality which can be done on the provider side of that as well. But I think we'll really get into that kind of learning health system concept where, to be frank, we will find there will be some data which is of poor quality. Obviously, that'll be fed back, in order to hopefully kind of rectify that for future uses. Do you want me to keep going, David, or?
I do, Mark. You're doing a brilliant job.
If you like.
You're doing there's a question there about. We've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Who will monitor linkage of multiple different data sets, which may enable re-identification? I think the key thing about this question is that firstly, all the data going into there is anonymized and pseudonymized. And yes, you can end up with a situation where you can find that where you can kind of regroup data. But remember, nothing comes out of the SDE without approval. Okay, so you can't take your results out, including anything that you may have done that might have inadvertently led to re-identification, unless that is approved by the Data Access Committee. So it's the Data Access Committee who also monitor stuff coming out of it, as well as what goes in and what happens inside. So no data leaves the NHS environment. That's the important thing about that. Do you need to apply for ethics approval? It rather depends on the particular study that you're doing. Remember, a lot of these are data that's coming in via 251, which means it kind of it's anonymized, so it doesn't need the same sort of ethical approval that you would if you were doing an individual patient identification type of process. ECG raw signals, I don't know is the answer to that, because it would depend if somebody had a massive data set of ECG raw signals to be able to put inside it and do the analysis inside there. Imaging data, though, very much is up there. Pathology data too. These are seen as real potential early adoption areas for STEs, particularly because of the sort of computing power that's required to host all of that type of information.
Public
How much?
trust.
Yep.
We're maybe bringing Catherine at this point as well. But just say we have got a very proactive public members group, which has been going for about 12 months now. And we use those for a lot of the core design of what we do. So the Data Access Committee being a point in case where they've looked at they've basically helped design the kind of terms of reference for that, as well as the evaluation criteria. And part of that is defining kind of what determines what is in the public interest around that. We are also planning kind of a communications campaign this year, which I'll hand over to Catherine just to give some points on that.
I mean, just on the public trust stuff, I mean, the PPIE stuff's baked into the programme, so that's why they've got a say in data being released. We've also done a lot of sort of street surveys and equity, equality, impact assessments and all of that to really understand who are the people that have already opted out of the national data opt-out, so that we can focus activity in particular areas and particular demographics. So the answer is a lot of work is being done, but obviously it's the PPIE work which is ongoing, and then the communications work's going to follow after that.
Right, I am going to have to draw us to a halt here. It's been probably the most interactive session that we've had yet as a lightning talk, and I think, as I say, that's testament to the quality of the speakers, but also to the topic itself. And I think if you do remember, I hope you made note of Alan's slide in the email contact, because I know we didn't get through all the questions, and I'm sorry about that. But we do make a rule that we stick to the time, and we can have frequent flyers know they can set their watches by us. So just remains for me to thank Alan and to Mark for their excellent contribution, and to Sian and to Beth for coordinating all of this. And we hope to see you at a future NHIP Lightning talk. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thanks again.